Hello, everyone, and welcome to IIeX Behavior. We're super excited to be here, and the reason why I'm so excited to be here is that I'm going to be talking to two great experts from Microsoft and EyeSee. So please welcome Krista Bradley, who's Senior Market Research Manager, Research and Insights at Microsoft. Hello, Krista.
Hello.
And also, we have Heather Graham, who is a Business Development Director at EyeSee. Hello, Heather. Welcome.
Hi.
So we're going to be talking about behavioral today. Obviously, that's the topic of the event, but in a different way, since I think a lot of people have great command of behavioral when it comes to FMCG and packaging and advertising. And not a lot of people have true expertise when it comes to e-commerce and UX. Those seem to be like big, scary things that are perhaps too complex. So I'm really hoping that this session will be useful to anyone watching in terms of how to think about research like this, how to prepare for it, and then importantly, how to distribute and socialize these insights across a huge ecosystem, one like Microsoft. Krista, our team loves working with you, and I know firsthand how delightful it is to hear you speak about insights. So will you first tell us a bit about yourself and your role and passions at Microsoft?
Sure. Yes, I've been at Microsoft almost 6 years now. The entire time has been in our Research and Insights organization. We're one of the few organizations that's centrally located in Microsoft, which means that we have people on our team that touch all parts of our business. As far as my passion, what I love retail. I think retail is super fascinating. It's right, you get that visceral reaction of the customer, what they're looking for. You get the delight of them buying what they need and what they like. And trying to really understand that is super, super complicated. And I really like being able to understand that complexity. So not only do I have to understand all of the different products that Microsoft sells, I also have to understand the behavior of how consumers think about our products. Not only in the US, but of course, globally as well.
So Heather, could you share some of your highlights and our digital team's highlights from being involved in this project with Krista and Microsoft?
I'd be happy to, and I am representing the digital team's insights here because this will be moving into the next round of this. Will be my first round with Krista, but already I can see it's going to be great. So our partnership with Krista and Microsoft is based on this extensive project that is multiple markets, multiple devices, stages of the shopper's journey. The whole process from initial setup to the final stage of reporting needs immaculate attention to detail, and there are a lot of them. So we've got a great team that is working to make this a success story for each and every flight. Luckily, Krista is just the right person to be on the other side, as it were. As we've seen here, Krista is a huge consumer insights advocate, and she also does a really great job of striking a great balance of being part of the team and a client, and folks on both sides of the table will understand what that means. She's not only super responsive, but she's happy to help and listen when we come across any hurdles. And on top of that, she always has in mind the key business issues and her internal stakeholders as her guiding beacon. So all of these in combination are why we have the privilege to talk about how successful this journey's been.
Thank you. And Krista, let's dive straight in. Could you speak to what an ideal prep for a study like this looks like for you? What are some of the things that you ensure are done well by taking extra time to maybe like reach a full understanding with the research agency, in this case EyeSee, before starting the project?
Yeah, so for me, the biggest thing is really talking to a wide variety of stakeholders. So I have stakeholders that are located in field teams all over the world, and they work directly with our retail partners. In addition, I also have corporate teams as well, and they design the corporate strategy. And then the third bucket are the go-to-market team as well. And so when you think about the complexity and what each of those individual teams is looking for, it can seem really disparate. And so it's really important when I'm designing a study that I understand each of those cohorts and what they're looking for. The best way that I do that is set up basically informational. So I'll go and talk about let's talk about your business. Let's talk shop. I want to learn more about what are the big things you're thinking about this year or in the next 2 months. With those, what I typically will do is write a research brief. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated, just the who, what, when, where, why of the study. And then I'll typically send that off then to each of the stakeholders as well and make sure that I have alignment. Once I have that, that's typically when I'll reach out to the vendor. That not only helps me have a really clear and concise view of what it is I'm looking for, it also helps make sure that I've got a good partnership with my vendors right out the gate as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned there are a lot of stakeholders. This study has a huge scope, both in geographies and through time in a way. And I would just like to share with the audience is that this study won the award for a Global Market Research Project of the Year back in 2019 when we ran the first flight of the study. So on the other hand, people working in huge companies might flinch at the mention of extensive studies that are done with one provider with the attention and the ambition to be helpful across multiple markets. So how do you approach a project with so many moving parts and manage to extract relevant insights across the board?
I really like to take a cue of where I can streamline things as much as possible. So I always have an end goal of the global, kind of the global view in mind. And that mostly comes at the corporate level. So at the corporate level, we need to have consistency in our branding and our strategy. At the local level, that's where they can take any of those cultural spins that are needed. So typically at the corporate level, we will plan more of a high level deck. It's usually longer, 50, 60 slides, and it covers all those different topics from the corporate stakeholders, the go-to-market team, those kinds of things. When we think about those local markets, we use templates. So we use a PowerPoint template and we say, what are the core things, or we know there's going to be nuances in each market. And we make sure that we have separate slides for those. It's a very modular approach. Then we can take global slides and we can use those for each deck, and then have those modular individual market slides or retailer slides that we can also add in as well. And that really helps a lot.
Yeah, that really makes sense when there's so many different levels of the study. And now when we're talking about the study, could you share some learnings perhaps, or at least what's the type of knowledge that the study helped you uncover?
Yeah, and so I can't talk specifically about the details of the study of our outcomes, of course, but I could definitely speak in general terms. So we were really able to break down some key nuts and bolts of a website when you think about the homepage and what effect that has on the customer and their experience, what effect the search results page has, and the product detail page. And so really what we did is we broke apart all of the different learnings that we had into those separate pieces, and we were able to create different recommendations based off of each of those for all of the retail partners.
And so you get this wealth of behavioral data. So what is it that comes next? So how do you keep it alive, and how does it feed into other non-research projects from then on? And I also love that you kind of talk about socializing rather than only disseminating the insights and not thinking about them again. Could you tell us more about the difference between the two and how do you approach that?
Yeah, I fondly refer to it as my roadshow. So it's the Krista Bradley roadshow. I meet with customers all over the world. So 6 a.m., 6 p.m., 9 p.m., middle of the night, whatever it is. But I find that those are actually where I really get the most knowledge. I find that not only am I telling the team something that they don't know and helping them understand their business, I learn just as much from them and how they react to the data and how they react to the insights as I think they learn from me. And what's really great about that is that at the end of each of those meetings, we go through and we write down, like, what are the things we would love to change about next year? Did we miss anything? What's different that we learned about or that we didn't anticipate? And so instead of making it a readout, we really truly call it a workshop. And so we plan an extra 30 minutes or so, and we do a lot of just breaking down the questions, breaking down the insights. I pause a lot and say, is this something that surprised you? Is this something that you expected? And sometimes it's, yep, carry on. And then other times it's, no, we've never heard anything like that before. That's incredibly surprising. And I think that that's a really, really valuable way to socialize the data. In addition, I also do these things called POVs. So I use SharePoint, and you can write news articles, and then you can send them off to groups through either Teams or other sorts of vehicles. And what I find really valuable about that is you can take more relevant information that maybe is 3 months after this study, 6 months after this study that you find from secondary sources or new business questions that come up, and you can reappropriate each of those individual pieces of data and bodies of research in addition to the new stuff that we have, which really continues to push us to learn and grow.
That really sounds terrific, especially like knowing that you're so like on board with all of those different people that you really take time to make sure it's right and clear to them as well.
Yeah.
Since we're at IIeX Behavior, can you tell us about what was the role of behavioral methods specifically in getting value out of this data?
Yeah, this is where EyeSee really comes to life for me. So I love the fact that we could watch where people's eyeballs were looking on a page. We could get their engagement with what they click on as areas of interest. And then to tie all of that together with the customer survey that goes on top of that. So being able to really utilize those three big bodies of information, we can understand on any given page, are consumers even seeing the different pieces of real estate that are on the page? If they see it, do they even care about it? We actually had one element of the page that was really passionate for us in our product description pages, and we put a lot of we put a lot of value on them. And we found that only 34% of people were even seeing what we were putting on the page, and of those, only 2 to 4% were clicking on it. And for us, that was just a huge. Well, of course, that was something that we're like, of course, we have to fix this. But that was just a huge revelation for us as well. And we were really able to target some of those quantitative questions to really gauge, do consumers even care about this? Maybe that's why they're not looking for it. Maybe that's why they're not seeing it. So being able to really go at the research from those three areas is super valuable.
Yeah, and what you're saying now, like this combination of, the what and the why and trying to make sense out of all that is just great. And especially to know that there were some big revelations for you that you didn't assume. And now to take a step back to a more meta question, what is your philosophy about trying innovative approaches to capture the online behavior and the experience of the users? Like I mentioned in the beginning, it kind of feels like there's, this big area of knowledge that not everyone is tapping into, and that sounds a bit too scary. It's growing exponentially. You need to nail every element right. So are there, some things that you discovered now that kind of fly under the radar of typical UX or e-commerce studies?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of innovation, that's something that's just inherent to our culture. We are expected to innovate. We get innovation budgets and we have to use them. And it's not just money to go play and try stuff. It's you have to have a good business plan for it. You have to have an expected result. You really have to sell it. And so you have to get really gritty and really creative on how you go about selling that. I think the other challenge with doing innovative research is that my stakeholders are usually the ones that pay for the majority of the research. And so I'm just the one that has to execute. And with that, they hold their money and their budget very sacred. And so what that means is that it's a lot easier to rinse and repeat. It's a lot easier to go with what's comfortable. If you're doing stuff that's more innovative, it's scarier and you're taking a lot bigger of a risk. And so it's not only a risk of me and my stakeholder, but it's also a risk of the business and the retail partnerships that we have and all that. So there's a lot at stake. And so with that, I really gauge on how to approach innovation by whether or not my stakeholder really wants to play and they really want to try new things, or if they're a little more apprehensive, I will typically start with something that's comfortable, but then just try to push the boundaries. So for example, with this study, it's a lot easier to say, we're doing a quantitative study. We do those all the time. Okay, but if we do this quantitative study and then we push this other little piece on top of it that unlocks a whole nother area, are we willing to try that? And so by just kind of ticking away at those things and building on what's comfortable, but always thinking a couple of steps ahead of what the stakeholder needs, I think that's really where you get a nice secret sauce.
Yeah, that's so brilliant. And I see Heather is nodding here. Yeah, no, that's really a part of our work that we try to explain, that it's not like shoving everything else aside. It's like building on top of things that you already know and then just expanding into a completely new field that can, deliver great results. And Heather, you're an expert in FMCG studies, actually, but what would be your advice to clients in general when running complex studies in e-commerce or any other area that's still a bit underexplored in comparison to packaging, advertising, etc.?
Sure. I mean, in any complex study, organization is key, of course. We've talked about detail orientation and all that. But I think in studies like this, it's important to know ingoing hypotheses are just that. As researchers, we need to remember to take a step back, let the consumer data tell us the story. It sounds trite, but we represent the voice of the consumer, not the voice of Heather, not the voice of Krista, and so on. But we do need to add the layer of our research and business expertise to the consumer voice for our stakeholders. But the basis of what we do is consumer-led insights. And that gets back to the example Krista described of a key element of the page that was getting missed. All of this is particularly true in fast-changing times like what we've been through globally for the last 18 months or so. So I think ensuring that we've done due diligence on setting up complex studies in areas of discovery or during times of discovery is critical. Garbage in, garbage out. And that may mean a couple extra steps, things like desk research, talking with counterparts in other countries or categories, connecting dots from other research initiatives are all ways to make sure that we're at the top of our game at EyeSee to help our clients navigate complexity. And then to go back to the crux of your question, Sonia, e-com is definitely different than FMCG, but while it's more complex sometimes than packaging, it's at least as exciting. And I think EyeSee's online path to purchase and some of the other e-com offerings we have simplify that complexity for our clients and their stakeholders.
I found that interesting piece of that too is really managing your stakeholders' expectations. And yeah, Heather, as you mentioned, really staying true to the voice of the customer. It's really easy to design a study that makes us look good from business people. Really, really easy. And I've worked with people in prior lives that have been like that. Hey, here's some money, make me look good. And I'm really upfront with my stakeholders that, you know, as much as I would love all of us to look great, we truly are the voice of the customer. And most of the time, or some of the times, you're not going to get what you think you got. And that's part of the beauty of it. And I think the way to manage through that is really the secret sauce. And so for me, I really challenge all of my vendors to give me pre-reads, to give me kind of like that, hey, what's going on? What's the pulse? What's happening? Because when I start filtering that stuff off to the vendors before the final reports come, and that really, really helps to understand the data and rather than challenging the data. So sometimes what will happen is if the stakeholder doesn't like what they hear, they just assume the data must be wrong. And that's an easy place to go. But by kind of trickling that information out and really socializing it with people, that really helps that you have confidence with the data when it comes out, and then you're that much more able to build off of it and make really good business impact.
Yeah, for sure.
And I agree. I think that kind of honesty with the stakeholders and, you know, while looking at the data is what really makes a difference in business as well. You can't live off, you know, vanity metrics or whatever. So that's a great point. Thank you. And again, back to Heather, since we're at the IIeX Behavior event, could you describe the difference for you that behavioral methods bring when added to any research project?
Sure. Normally, we'd be on a stage in front of people and able to point and gesture and visually demonstrate behavior and the importance it has in consumer research. We'll have to save that for next year. But for now, we can, you know, talk about conversion from ads or displays or shop now prompts, and we definitely should. Those are critical metrics. But I think behavior-based research literally shows us what worked, what was seen, as Krista mentioned, what struck the right emotional chord, when something was clicked or tapped, not just that it was, and what didn't. Ultimately, where to continue to invest, where to improve. Claim-based research is great for diagnostics, and we use it in our studies with Microsoft, but it is post-rationalized, so it doesn't give us in-the-moment insights as to what happened. And as we've all seen, either AI, machine-based learning, however you want to talk about it, is absolutely fantastic for improving operations, dealing with heaps of words, navigating some complexities quickly. But I think we all need to be careful in how it's used so that we don't move too far away from the consumer. Ultimately, including behavioral components in research gets us closer to the consumer and closer to in-market success for our clients.
And Krista, are there any last thoughts you'd like to share with our audience today? Anything we forgot to ask you?
I don't think so. I think it's just overall, it's just been really fun to work with EyeSee. I think it's been really great in that they're always willing to challenge themselves with me, and I never have a problem with asking a big crazy question. And so far, I haven't had them tell me, "No, you're insane." So I would say that that's a positive thing. But it's really great to work with a company that wants to innovate and try new things as much as I do, and being able to really build on some of those crazy ideas and bring them into reality or bring them into fruition is always super, super exciting.
Thank you so much. We really, I spoke to our digital team who works with you, and they really feel the same way about you. Like they found a true partner who's like on the same, like frequency with them, and they can experiment and try out great new things. So thank you so much, Heather, and thanks again, Krista, for joining us today, and thanks to everyone who tuned in. We're really, really proud of this partnership and how it's pushed us to evolve new tech, new solutions, and all in the purpose of delivering the closest possible insights we can to the consumer and be very, very consumer-centric.